36. This is a special report. Hugo, your stories and ours.
Good evening. For many of you, this is the first chance you've had to watch television in a long, long time. And if so, you've missed many of the sights and sounds of the greatest natural disaster ever to hit the Carolinas, Hurricane Hugo.
It's an event that binds us together. The fury of the storm touched us all in so many ways that we really didn't think was possible just a week ago. Each of us has a story of that moment that we came face to face with Hurricane Hugo.
But because of those power outages, many in the area have been unable to see or hear the valiant ways in which their neighbors have coped with this devastating storm. This is a chance to share those stories, yours and ours.
During the next hour, we'll take you through the events of last Wednesday through Sunday. You'll hear from neighbors and friends, even strangers, and those of us at News 36, as we all did what we had to survive Hurricane Hugo.
We begin with Wednesday night when News 36 weatherman Steve Raleigh reported that the hurricane was bearing down on the Carolina coastline.
Wednesday clearly was a pivotal day for Charlotte. As Hugo approached the southeastern United States, no one knew for sure where it was going to hit. So the day was spent doing hourly updates to keep everyone informed.
Hurricane watches are possible by 5:30 tonight. We'll have another update in 1 hour.
This is a News 36 hurricane update.
Good afternoon, I'm Steve Raleigh. Right now, Hurricane Hugo still at 105 miles per hour, but something has changed. It has picked up speed.
This is a News 36 hurricane update.
Good evening, I'm Steve Raleigh. We have some important information to tell you about. We have just received word now that Hurricane Hugo has picked up speed. You'll see the monstrous 3D picture here behind me. Here we are sitting right there in the Carolinas.
This is a News 36 hurricane update.
Good evening, I'm Steve Raleigh. We have the latest, as they say, hot off the presses from the Hurricane Center. And as you can see behind me, Hugo has become more organized. In fact, it is now 550 miles from Savannah, Georgia. And winds have picked up. It's now up to 110 miles an hour. These two displays will show you what has gone on. This oblong or oval effect was earlier, but now look at it. It is better organized, almost two commas put together.
Does the storm scare you?
Yes, it does. No telling what it could do.
I think if that storm hit this marina at 100 miles an hour, it'd wipe it out.
People are leaving town. They're coming in and buying batteries and candles, which are the prime things that you'll need if electricity goes out.
I'm getting off the island. I think only a fool would stay around here in a hurricane that strong. I think it'd be stupid to stay.
Well, I used to be a paratrooper. I'm not afraid of anything.
Work till you drop. I mean, there's more people out here that want their houses done than I can get to tonight.
It's going to be hard to get a good night's sleep.
There is a mandatory evacuation in effect. All residents are urged to leave the island.
It's kind of hard to believe that there's a killer hurricane out there.
The police officer that was at that medical associate
It just got me very nervous. And I'm praying and hoping that everything would go over real smooth.
How high is the water going to get? What if the windows blow out? What if somebody gets hurt? I'm scared.
In Myrtle Beach, sudden fear as Hugo turns closer to a resort which has dodged storm after storm for decades. The 2nd Avenue Pier's final hours. The decision is made. All valuables go.
Where are you taking everything?
They're taking it over to, where are you taking it, Greg? 501?
Past 501.
Out past 501.
How far is that from here?
Industrial Park, about 3 miles.
The surf builds, a clue to the furious assault to come. Tonight, Hugo will claim the pier, rebuilt 35 years earlier in the wake of Myrtle Beach's biggest disaster, Hazel, 1954.
When are you going to bring it back?
Hopefully tomorrow, day after. If it's still here.
That's what they're facing in the coastal counties.
But Charlotte, the land of glass skyscrapers and no beaches, is bracing for the onslaught as well. Highway 74 tonight, the Carolina conduit looking more like a conga line of headlights as caravans of cars come in, hiding from Hugo.
You're coming in Highway 74. I understand that the hotels out there are filling up, but you can try the Luxbury.
Those who need help and accommodations found it here, the Visitors Bureau. It stayed open to direct city visitors and offer information.
Sir, we have them available on that same side. We have one room.
Our advice well taken. At the Luxbury, 20 to 30 people have checked in. Others have made reservations. Those numbers duplicated at hotels around town. For those who live here, precautions extended certainly to the lake, where the utility is already lowering the water level to absorb what will likely come from the storm. Boat owners battening down hatches, but for those with property or friends down south, getting ready takes precedence over getting out. Sales of plywood, even here, remarkably higher tonight, even though their effect against Hugo might be minimal.
It would withstand maybe the outer winds, but if a direct hit, they said it wouldn't do any good.
And those who are staying are bracing for it. Some folks buying gasoline tonight just in case. Many others buying necessities like water. Until yesterday, people really weren't taking Hugo serious. Now you look around and you see all this. Think people are worried?
I think so. I am.
Think we have a right to be?
I think so, with the tornadoes and everything. That's the main thing that bothers me, is tornadoes.
The store where he shopped had been nearly emptied of its supplies, not only water, but other staples as well. All this to escape the ferocity of a storm that could make us think back to 1954, when Hazel reached nearly this far inland.
Forecasting the storm took on a, whole new dimension Thursday night. That's when that update came in, and as soon as it came in, there was a real sense of urgency, because you could tell by the force of the storm, this was not going to be some ordinary hurricane. It is a Category 4 hurricane. This is a devastating hurricane, and quite frankly, it has gone from the simple of, gee, this is a big hurricane, to this is going to cause devastation where it hits along the coast for tonight. Let's get right into it, because we've got a lot to tell you about.
After the update came in, we went to the computer and fixed together a wind speed map. And when we looked at the values, it was hard to believe.
135 plus, right around that projected path of where it should strike, and 100-mile-per-hour winds about 100 miles from there, and 35 to 75 over Charlotte, and as you move down to the southwest. Naturally, if you're closer to the beach, the winds will be gustier, and you'll see even 20-mile-per-hour winds outside the state when that hits tonight at midnight.
At this point, only time stood between Hurricane Hugo and landfall. When we come back in just a moment, we'll show you where Hugo struck along the Carolinas coast with a wind so fierce it could lift you off the ground.
We'll also show you how a bride-to-be handled her wedding rehearsal in the midst of Hugo's wake.
Hugo, your stories and ours will continue.
This WCNC-TV Hurricane Special, Hugo, Your Stories and Ours, is brought to you in part by Nationwide Insurance and 1110 WBT-AM Radio.
Hi, I'm Steve Raleigh. You know, although many areas in and around Charlotte were hit hard by Hurricane Hugo, one place that's really suffering is Berkeley County, South Carolina. 150,000 people will be without electricity and water for another month. There's an emergency appeal for our help. In addition to canned goods and bottled water, they need baby products. Volunteers will accept your contributions at the following locations throughout this weekend. Please help Berkeley County pull out of this crisis. Thank you very much for your help.
By Thursday night, the stories that had dominated the headlines were about to be pushed to the back page. Of course, the Jim Baker trial, the crash of U.S. Air Flight 5050 were about to take a back seat to Hurricane Hugo. Residents all across the region bracing themselves for the storm, and at the same time, newsrooms preparing themselves for Hurricane Hugo.
Of course, as journalists, we are very used to observing stories and reporting them to you, but rarely do we become part of the story. But Hurricane Hugo changed our lives just as it changed yours.
News 36 had been bringing you regular updates on the storm from the Weather Center. And even though he was indoors during one of those updates, Larry Sprinkle felt firsthand the power of Hugo's gusts.
Maximum winds, sustained winds, are 80 miles an hour. We've received gusts up to about 100 miles an hour. Shaw Air Force Base. I've been distracted because, as a lot of people are experiencing, part of our ceiling just collapsed in here. This is a very serious system that is going through Charlotte right now. We are feeling the real brunt of the storm at the moment. So we here in the studio are having some roofing collapsing, so I'm going to take it back to you, Ray.
That was just a sigh from Hugo, but as Steve Raleigh pointed out early Friday morning, it foreshadowed what people at the Carolinas would have to face.
But for the rest of us right in around the Charlotte area, we're getting buffeted by these winds. You can see back behind my weather patio what it's done to some of these trees here. In fact, I feel a good gust coming up, and you'll see them bend almost horizontally in around. In fact, that one that you see right there has really been buffeted over this period tonight.
One of the things that the viewers who are watching will probably never forget is that dramatic three-dimensional loop of the hurricane that we had overnight. I guess that and the fact that I seem to be carrying different items every time in our reports.
Something that we noticed, Steve, you were talking on the telephone there. Was that the latest from the Weather Service since they cannot use their regular manner of getting to you?
That's right. What has happened is our satellite dishes that normally bring in all of our information off the roof have been blown so that we aren't getting them, obviously, from the satellite. So we've taken the mobile phone and we're talking to them directly. In my hand, I just wanted to show you, we showed these overnight, a portion of our roof that fell overnight. Let me set that there while I give you a little bit of information of what's going on.
No, you talk about information. We were without question the most fortunate people in town. I mean, to have the #1 man at the Hurricane Center giving us information, well, it was great.
Just a few moments ago, we had an opportunity to speak with the director of the Hurricane Center, Bob Sheets.
Charlotte, North Carolina is about where the center's at. The hurricane, of course, weekend has moved inland, the eye of the storm, just weakening here and moving toward the north. We've had reports recently here from Raleigh-Durham as well as in the Charlotte area of near hurricane force winds and gusts, but now below hurricane.
The thing about this storm was the hours we spent in fear. A tornado is over in minutes, but Hugo's winds seemed like they would never stop. I remember the power of the wind.
Winds will get up to 132 miles an hour.
At one point, my reporter, Dave Barker, was lifted off his feet and thrown back.
This is Dave Barker, News 36 reporting.
Nowhere seemed safe. The roof was coming off the disaster preparedness shelter. A tree fell on our truck. Ducking behind cars gave only a short break from the wind. No shelter from falling trees. Rain shorted out my viewfinder. I was shooting blind. We couldn't talk.
I lost my viewfinder again!
We were literally helpless for hours. Hours which are a sobering memory that will never stop flowing. And for now, the winds of Hugo did not stop either. They lessened only slightly before slamming into Charlotte.
Stay inside. It is treacherous out there now. What we have been seeing all over the city of Charlotte are downed tree limbs on almost every street. It took us nearly an hour to get from the downtown area just to our station. Many of the streets are blocked not only by trees, but by power lines, and that's an extremely hazardous situation. We have seen trees that have fallen into houses. You had the report there in Union County. We expect the same thing happening right here in Charlotte because as we have been driving along, Jesse, we have been hearing or monitoring the police band frequencies, and we have heard a lot of reports of trees that have hit houses and with people trapped inside.
And as we mentioned, of course, there has been one fatality now in the Wesley Chapel area of Union County, a baby trapped in a crib there.
I say it is so bad out there. As we were driving along one of the overpasses on the freeway, suddenly the wind picked up our live unit and just brought it right next to the guardrail, and we were staring straight down at almost 2 stories to the ground level. It is frightening.
Power lines down everywhere, trees down everywhere.
Well, it's kind of hard to sleep, though, big wind coming through the window.
And on the way in it, the wind took my breath. It was terrible.
I'm just worried to death about my husband.
Also, they have cited tornadoes in Cleveland County in the Kings Mountain area.
Then our lights went out and it started shaking again, and I said, we're getting out of here, but we had an awful time getting here.
Everything is breaking crazy right now.
Just for your information, if you had any thoughts of trying to get downtown today, it's not a very good idea.
I've never been in a storm this rough.
Flooded.
Charlotte has never seen a storm like this before in their city. To hear the storm during the night and to see the devastating results that morning will always remind them of Hurricane Hugo.
I was born and raised here, but I've never seen anything like this. I can remember back when Hurricane Hazel hit, but it wasn't nothing like this. This is really amazing.
The awesome force shown by the destruction of houses, trees that had fallen, cars that were crushed, made it obvious that Charlotte would soon be declared a disaster area.
It's horrible. We heard we lost a hospital. Part of it collapsed. I don't know what part. I think it was Trident Hospital.
Communication was limited. People did it the old-fashioned way. Travelers told the news to each other as they passed. They talked of power lines that were down, which roads were blocked, and how they never would have guessed this would have happened to Charlotte.
When I heard Category 4, never hit Charlotte. Listen, next time I know better.
But Charlotte wasn't the only place Hugo left its mark. There were others.
In Maiden, we stopped by to check on the Abernathy family. A 100-year-old oak had pounded their two-story home.
When we were standing there watching, all of a sudden we just heard a pop, a crack, then glass started breaking in the house.
How bad is the damage inside?
Windows broken out, walls knocked loose, through the ceiling in one room. So it's pretty bad.
Outside of town, this neighborhood was convinced a tornado had ripped through dozens of trees. They were thankful their homes were spared, but other property was lost.
I heard a lot of popping and a booming going on, and I happened to look out there, and it done fell over my Regal there and just demolished it. It's the first time something ever happened to me like this.
The scenes of destruction were repeated over and over as we tracked the storm through Catawba, Iredell, and Caldwell counties.
As bad as the greater Charlotte area was, the Carolinas coastline was even worse, as News 36 reporter Dave Barker discovered.
The upbringing took hundreds of years. A quick death would take less than 3 hours.
The president declared a disaster this morning about 11 o'clock.
A virtual war zone established. No structure in the city was spared, many becoming islands. Got a picture now that's going to give you a healthy dose of respect for the power of a hurricane. We're about a block from the water, about a mile from the nearest marina. By air came the definition of disaster. The link to the major islands cut off. Folly Beach, the Isle of Palm, Sullivan's Island, James Island, Mount Pleasant, the list of areas of near total devastation went on. Stories of the night of fear could be seen and read on all faces here.
The most terrifying experience I can remember in my adult life.
Not all were of destruction.
When I got there and I seen my house, it brought tears to my eyes just to see it still there. You know, it's not something that lives, but it didn't have insurance, and I built it.
A hurricane disaster unparalleled. Now, words could describe the scene, but could not touch the emotions churning within.
The damage that these people have sustained. There's gardens down here which people have taken years to get beautiful. And their houses and the roofs off. It's just a crying shame, it really is.
Garden City, South Carolina. 8 hours ago, Hugo was here. Normally busy Waccamaw Drive, a trail of sand. The many swimming pools here are just shells on the beach. The sand which once anchored them carried far away.
It's gone, everything.
Gary and Linda Blake looked over the wreckage of their home and business, the Journey's End Apartments. The Blakes knew hurricanes are always a threat to those who live on the beach, but...
Well, you think about it, but you never think it's going to happen to you.
What are you going to do now?
I don't know.
I have no idea.
Everything we have is right here.
Now, despite the havoc that Hugo wreaked on some of our favorite vacation spots, the attention of most Charlotteans turned to the Queen City that day because we had plenty of problems of our own.
And coming up, we'll show you how we responded to our own needs and to those of our neighbors.
Hugo, your stories and ours will continue.
By Friday morning, it was apparent that almost no one from the Carolinas coast to here in the Queen City had escaped the wrath of the most powerful natural disaster ever to hit our region. Not the oceanside communities, not the outlying counties, not even us here at News 36.
Hugo's 1-2 punch of high winds and blinding rains may have knocked us down, but it didn't knock us out entirely. When Hugo rolled out of Charlotte, the Charlotteans rolled up their sleeves and got to work. The Emergency Operations Center staff, a group of county and city officials, got together and began to assess the situation by Friday morning.
We did have a great deal of responses directly related to the storm. We had a significant number of 10 or more victims who were entrapped by either in their cars or homes by falling trees. These people had to be extricated and transported to facilities. As many as 3 of those did sustain some significant injuries. But mostly what we've seen have been general medical type calls that we would probably have received under normal conditions as well.
What kind of problems are you running into out there today in the performance of your duties?
Primarily just reaching calls with trees down. We've actually had situations where we've had to park some distance away and walk. We've had at least 2 trucks who were trapped in neighborhoods that once they got in, they had trees falling in front of them and behind them, could not get out. We had to abandon those vehicles, call in other trucks, and going back to get the trucks now.
What does that mean in the event of an emergency today? Obviously, you're going to have to just do the best you can, but are there going to be delays today out there in the service?
There could potentially be. So far, things have gone very well for us. We've been running Rita at an overload state, but using our volunteer resources has helped us a great deal.
TV news is a tough enough job on any given day. It's even tougher when you're forced to work in an unfamiliar environment. At 11 a.m. on Friday, we were forced to evacuate WCNC-TV. A cable dangling from our tower was threatening to fall on our building. So we packed up and moved our entire news operation to the city-county building. There, we set up a makeshift newsroom with work areas for reporters, producers, and photographers.
Great. How we doing on time? About a minute. That's good. That's good because...
With only 2 phone lines, gathering information was tough. One phone was in constant use. We were trying to find out if we would even be allowed back into our building. And the other wasn't idle very often either. Steve Raleigh had no weather machines, no computers, nothing to help him gather the information that he needs to do a weather forecast. He had to rely on his contacts at the National Weather Service office. We had no idea if we'd even be allowed back into the studio in time to do a 5:30 newscast, but we kept working right along as if we would.
Like many Charlotteans, I've watched Hugo in the height of his pre-dawn fury, snapping neighborhood trees like matchsticks. And now with the marching orders given that we move our news operation uptown, I head my car in that direction. Everywhere, down trees, turning Charlotte streets into a giant maze with countless dead ends. It's midday, and already the roar of Hugo's winds being replaced by the roar of chainsaws. I encounter lifeless traffic lights, some of the first symptoms of a massive, crippling power outage. Intersections are mass confusion. As I approach the uptown area, those who have ignored the warnings to gas up and stock food are waiting in lines that stretch for blocks. Then the first sign of good news: there is limited power uptown, and our skyscrapers are standing tall, but the evidence of Hugo is everywhere. Huge panes of glass from floors high above, shattered all over the uptown streets. More uprooted trees, and bashed-in storefronts. Police are trying to maintain order.
Behind the debris of the fallen trees that made the chapel at Thompson Park so special, Rebecca Thompson was rehearsing for the biggest day of her life, Saturday, her wedding day, with fiancé Steve Atkinson. Plans were just great till Hugo crashed the rehearsal.
Getting here has been horrible.
Rough day, huh?
Horrible. I don't have my dress still. The place is still closed. I don't have my shoes. My bridesmaids are all here without any of their clothes. We can't pick anything up because everything is closed. Our rehearsal dinner is now hamburgers and tuna fish.
They always promise brides that marriages are for better or for worse. Rebecca figures she's had one part of that phrase already.
This is the worst part. The better is yet to come.
Keep
People hadn't really planned for the gasoline lines, just like they hadn't planned for Hugo. Once they were out of their houses, they seemed panicked. With only 2 or 3 stations open in all of uptown Charlotte, lines like this should have been expected, but they weren't. When we drove by here, I counted 81 cars in line.
It's rough, man. It's rough because, you got to spend a lot of time to try to get some gas.
How you coping with all this?
Well, tolerating it like everybody else is doing.
It was so bad, several off-duty Charlotte police officers stopped by to help out.
Pull it right behind you, down.
This policeman was headed home after a 12-hour shift and is also a National Guard captain. He correctly guessed he'd be called out shortly, but still took the time to help out the station owner.
Dartmouth was one of many streets that would bring up the phrase war-torn Myers Park. A huge tree lay across this second floor. Its companion lay across this second floor, and the car in their driveway. The neighborhood pulled together. First they cheered up the victims, then they rolled up their sleeves, all just to help out.
We've had neighbors from all up and down the street. This is my neighbor on the other side up here with me right now, and just sort of swapping off and helping each other all day. I would have to say that I'm very pleased with the way folks have responded, and it has really helped.
The couple who lives here are attorneys. They had lost plenty, but something had made them leave the bedroom just before tragedy hit.
We had just moved from the front bedroom where the dormer was damaged into the middle bedroom where the side dormer is.
This was about 3:30, 4 o'clock?
About 3 o'clock, yeah. And the tree came down about a half hour, an hour after that. We'd kind of been falling in and out of sleep.
Will they leave because of Hugo? I asked them that. They said not hardly. Charlotte's spirit and heart matched in this case by determination.
A bunch of great people in this neighborhood, and I think Charlotte should be proud.
In many cases, we saw how the worst of times brought out the best in people. But at this point, we were still in the early chapters of Hugo's aftermath.
And when we come back, we'll take you to Saturday when the peacekeepers were brought in. And a Charlotte man tells of his close call with Hugo's destructive force.
Hugo, your stories and ours will continue.